All right, welcome to the first ever edition of the SERMAblast. This is a podcast devoted to quick, rip from the headline stories that are breaking. Our regular podcast, the SERMA Pod, that takes a little bit deep dive into these subjects, but this is literally torn from the headlines. I'm Rich Lenkov. I'm the founder and CEO of SERMA, the Sports and Entertainment Risk Management Alliance. We're very privileged to have really one of the foremost legal analysts anywhere dealing with sports law, a member of SERMA. He is host of Conduct Detrimental, the capital THE Sports Law podcast. He's also an attorney at Morit, Hawk, and Hamroff. Dan Luss, welcome to the SERMAblast, first ever one.
Rich, it is very exciting. It's also exciting because today's Friday, so lots of exciting things today. First time on the SERMAblast. And we're one day away from the weekend. So lovely to join you as always.
Absolutely. You're quoted all over media. We've seen you on CNN, on Fox, on CBS, on ESPN. Let's jump right into our headlines. So the first one deals with Yasiel Puig, former slugger, most notably for the Dodgers. So he entered a plea deal involving sports betting. Then he withdrew from it. What's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, the long and short, right, this is not a case about sports betting. That is not a federal crime, at least last I checked. But, the question is really whether and to what extent someone can make a plea and then withdraw it. In federal court, I think it's a little bit easier to withdraw a plea. I'm not necessarily practicing on the criminal side. I had a little bit of experience right out of school. But, why I think this is relevant, right? Yasiel Puig is under a federal instrument admitting to being involved in sports betting, which is big news, right? In our sports world and, maybe our quasi-legal world, we know that's a no-no, but it's particularly a no-no in baseball where Pete Rose, who was and should have been a first ballot Hall of Famer, was banned from the Hall of Fame. So Yasiel Puig, Rich, in the kind of like middle of the night, he's a 2019, he's like a 28-year-old. He's got a pretty successful career and all of a sudden drops off the face of baseball. It's kind of unheard of. And now, right, 3 years later, Puig, again, under a federal instrument, admits to betting on baseball. You kind of have to ask yourself whether maybe somebody within baseball knew that, because those, the alleged years of betting, I think it was 2019, he was at the Indians and Reds, was alleged to have occurred while he was a member of Major League Baseball, not a free agent, not someone between teams. So, that's probably the big takeaway, that someone is admitting to it. Obviously, things have changed since, but admitting to that under a, federal instrument, I think is a very big story for a current baseball player.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, sports betting has come a long way, obviously, given its legalization, almost everywhere. We've come a long way even since Pete Rose, but there's still a stigma for sure. And there's still, obviously a big concern among entities like Major League Baseball with players who are active players who might be wagering on games, right? That just doesn't look right. So you're right, that was news. How do you think this affects his ability to play baseball going forward? I mean, how do you think this will, even whatever the outcome of the case, how do you think this looks for him going forward?
Well, it's probably irrelevant to talk about the other part of the update. The plea was news. You know what else is news? The withdrawn plea, or the attempt to withdraw the plea. So I guess Puig is alleging he didn't have a criminal defense lawyer present. So I guess he had some maybe civil lawyer present, and he didn't have his own translator present. So, obviously Yasiel Puig, not a Native American or not a native English speaker. So he's claiming that as, I think a litany of things, that he might have some ADHD. He didn't understand the actual document he was signing at the time, the gravity of the situation. Do I think if the plea is withdrawn and Puig fights this and wins, I think he can play in baseball again? He hasn't played baseball in the last 3 years before anyone knew about this allegation. Maybe, Rich, someone could convince me that baseball knew about this ahead of time, just like, I believe the NFL was keyed up to Calvin Ridley betting on football before we knew as a public. Yasiel Puig separately has, I think, 2, maybe 3 sexual assault allegations with him in particular. So, the allegations, right, they are what they are, innocent until proven guilty. But you start mounting up these amount of allegations in a guy that hasn't played baseball at the major league level in 3 years. I think we could bet the house that he's not going to play baseball in the majors again. I think he played in South Korea in the Mexican League. He might play baseball somewhere, but not for Major League Baseball. I don't think that's happening.
Dan, a lot of us who follow professional football remember a quarterback named John Kitna, bounced around the league, but had a pretty successful career, most notably with the Cincinnati Bengals. John Kitna's son was released yesterday from a jail in Florida after posting bonds on a 5 child pornography charges. Police said that included pictures of a man having sex with a young girl. What's notable, in addition to the fact that he's the son of a former quarterback, is because he is also a quarterback playing for the University of Florida, a very prominent program, of course. Kind of surprising, of course, this story. What's your take on it?
Yeah, a couple factors here, right? We don't normally talk about child pornography cases in our athlete realm. Again, we don't really pick the stories in sports law; they just kind of find us. But that's kind of. It's happened. It's certainly rare. Number two, it's the son of a pretty big athlete. John Kitna had a pretty successful career with the Bengals. And then the third part of it is this is a quarterback for University of Florida, pretty big program, pretty big recruit, and a guy that I think was expected to play the upcoming year. Not a guy that just so people know the background, not a guy that's anticipated, at least as of now, to have some very high level draft stock, but still at a premier program, and his dad had a very successful long career. So. I guess at the heart of this, pretty kind of, again, everything is still moving, but we'll say reportedly, Rich, because so a lot of stuff still. I guess this is the SERMAblast. We gotta go with what we know at the present moment of time. So here's the underlying gist of what is believed to have happened as of today. And again, I'll say allegedly, reportedly, claimed. Again, this is what we know. It's still a work in progress. Jalen Kitna, the son, is alleged to have shared this image on a platform called Discord, which some of you may know. It's a messaging device. It's kind of like group forums. But this photograph wasn't alleged to have been shared with like one particular person, which that can amount to distribution, certainly. It was alleged to have been shared on a public platform, and it was that platform that was notified by other users of this image being put into circulation. So it's not just a possession charge here; it's a distribution charge, and it wasn't like sent to someone or sent to an alleged victim or anything like that. It was shared and maybe almost too crazy to be true, just shared publicly. So even if it wasn't a child involved, which again I'm not going to involve myself with seeing what this image was or anything like that. But for an athlete at an NCAA level, at a collegiate level, and son of a big athlete, to be sharing any form of pornography allegedly on a platform like that, in 2022 is very surprising. And I imagine, he'd still get in trouble with the school, Florida, maybe not criminal charges, for sharing just, not non-child pornography, but still pornography. So really reckless, I think at best. And it's sad to see. So, yeah, there's a number of, claimed to be a number of witnesses to this event. It's not necessarily just like a one-on-one messaging here. So I think it's important to the story.
Yeah. And interestingly, and not surprisingly, I guess I should say, Florida's already released a statement disavowing, obviously any criminal behavior on behalf of their student athlete. And, Dan, you deal with these issues every day. We at SERMA do as well. And it's increasingly important, obviously, for, entities like professional sports teams or leagues, and of course, a university, especially one that's, taking public funds from the public like the University of Florida does, to immediately deal with the reputational risk involved, right? And we're seeing a lot of examples. We'll talk in our next segment in a second about another school dealing with this issue. But, child pornography in the same sense as University of Florida can have a devastating impact on the school's reputation. Yeah.
And obviously in this day and age, right, you're in a battle for recruits, for transfers, going through that transfer portal. It's a very different world, and maybe even the smallest point, like the smallest decision point, right? Florida has a number of different schools, hundreds of different athletes across all their various sports. But, everyone knows, right? Football is king. It's the biggest revenue generator in college sports by a decent margin. And then again, right, we're not talking about like a kicker or a punter. We're talking about the quarterback of the team, and a high profile quarterback, a high level recruit. So yeah, by no means a good look. You got to figure out, how you kind of look out for those type of personalities. Maybe the additional level of screening needs to be involved. But yeah, it's certainly troublesome for the University of Florida. Not a good look by any means.
And you could imagine that this is not the end of the story. Whatever criminal action, however that works out, you can expect to see some civil liability, some civil lawsuits against the University of Florida for sure. Speaking of liability against the university, the last story we'll cover here is the arrest in the wake of the Michigan State-Michigan melee we saw after the game, in which several players have now been arrested. 7 Michigan State Spartan football players involved have been arrested. Michigan State has had some legal issues over the last couple of years. The trend continues. Of course, this is a criminal action against these individual players. But again, there are implications, much like there are in Gainesville, more broadly for the university.
Couple things. Yeah. Criminal charges have been filed, 7 players involved. If people haven't, you should look up the video. This is the problem with the podcast format. We can't show you the video as is, but if you just watch the video from this Michigan State game, obviously Michigan wins by a lot. We're not going to talk about it here. Michigan is heading to the college football playoff, seemingly, right? They end up beating their rival by a good margin, Michigan State. And what happens afterwards? We don't know what precipitated it, but we see a video of what looks like more than 7. I would probably say closer to 10, 15 Michigan State players surrounding 1 or 2 Michigan players and swinging helmets, kicking while players on the ground. The ultimate charges here, I think, are obviously aided by the video. This is not normal, pregame scuffle with players pushing each other. This occurred after the game was over in the tunnel. If we're just talking about a proximity to the field, maybe, between 30 and 50 yards away from the actual game in the tunnel, right? It's not a part of the game. We're not talking about assumption of the risk where there was a on-field skirmish. From this, Michigan State said they were announcing an investigation, and 7 players, end up coming out here with criminal charges, 1 charged with a felony. And I will say, Rich, I know this is a show that we cater to risk management professionals. Rich, are you familiar with the maybe impending civil lawsuit that's supposed to come from this?
Yeah.
I actually, with my insurance defense background, I actually find that one to be interesting, right?
Well,
and it's, I think, a topic you and I talked about on the old podcast once upon a time. It's a negligent security claim that I think is going to kind of underlie that. Where was security? How does this brawl happen for 10 to 20 seconds? Security is nowhere to be found. This is broken up by other Michigan State players. Security has an obligation, certainly on the field, in the fans or in the stands, but in the tunnel, right, where this could potentially happen. So I know the lawyer that I think is potentially involved here has mentioned that, this should happen, right? Your players are walking off the field. Something like this is reasonably foreseeable. At least from those videos, it doesn't look like security is doing anything. Maybe they're near, but certainly not getting their hands dirty.
It's such a great point. It's a great way to end the SERMAblast today, and it's consistent with what we've talked about repeatedly in the few months that SERMA's been around, that at the end of the day, a lot of these issues deal with straightforward negligence considerations, and in this case, notice. And it will be hard for the university to allege that they did not have the requisite notice for the plaintiffs to establish liability in a civil suit, because as you said, number one, this is a natural rivalry, right? This is not Michigan State versus Idaho. This is Michigan State, a huge in-state rivalry during rivalry weekend, in-state rivals, Big Ten rivals. Not only that, but this has happened before. There have been dust-ups between these two teams. In addition to that, the physical space, just objectively, is going to lead to this, right? How about separating them? How about not using the same tunnel? I mean, you're limited by the architecture of it, but there's ways to have one team only go in. So, there's lots of takeaways for a lot of our members in learning from this and how to avoid this in the future, and how to avoid a plaintiff's attorney saying, A, look at the video, but B, look at the history that the university was aware of. So hopefully we can all learn from that going forward. Dan Lust, Conduct Detrimental host, SERMA member, star of the first ever SERMAblast. Thank you so much. We'll see you on the next one. There's inevitably going to be lots more both sports and entertainment issues that we'll cover. Breaking news. Thanks again, Dan Lust.
My pleasure, Rich. Anytime.